We are joined today by 4 political groups, including Lynn Boylan here as Chair of the Delegation for Relations with Palestine, Cecilia Strada of the S&D Group, Barry Andrews of Renew Europe, and Miranda of Greens EFA. So let's start off with Lynn. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Manus. And I'd like to thank everyone for coming, and to my colleagues, Cecilia, Barry and Anna, for being here with us today. As we've already said, we're all aware of the rapidly deteriorating situation in the Middle East following the illegal attacks by the United States and Israel on Iran, and we fully expect that this will be debated in plenary next week. However, the situation in occupied Palestine, while it has fallen from the news cycle, is also rapidly deteriorating. In the West Bank and East Jerusalem, illegal settlement expansion is accelerating. The Knesset is passing new legislation to change the land registry process and to steal more Palestinian land. And we have a rapidly escalating settler violence that is directly backed by the Israeli state. In Gaza, the Israeli government is still murdering Palestinians, and according to UNRWA, since the so-called ceasefire, over 600 Palestinians have been killed. Israel are still not fulfilling their humanitarian aid obligations, particularly in light of the October 2025 ICJ advisory opinion on this issue. And this weekend, we once again saw Israel close down all of the access points to Gaza as they began their assault on Iran. Across occupied Palestine, we have legislation to introduce racialised capital punishment being progressed through the Knesset, and we have NGOs being banned for failing to accede to Israel's demands on registration. We have not had a debate on Palestine in plenary since December. As the issue has fallen from the agenda, the actions of the Israeli government are getting more and more extreme. So today I'm calling on the President of the European Parliament and the leaders of the political groups to ensure that there is a standalone debate on Palestine in the plenary next week. As Israel and the United States attack Iran, Israel will do what it has always done and use this as cover to expand its occupation of Palestinian land and its system of apartheid against the Palestinian people. So the European Parliament must debate these issues urgently and must not let Palestine fall from the political agenda.
Thank you. For our next speaker, Cecilia Strada.
Thank you, Manus, and thank you very much to Lynn Boylan and her team for arranging this timely press conference. Thanks also to Barry Andrews and Miranda. I would like to start by saying that all throughout this legislative term, the political groups here represented have tried constantly to put debates on Palestine on the plenary agenda. As Lynn said, we have proposed debates and resolutions on specific topics such as widespread torture practices in Israeli prisons, the death penalty bill that the Knesset is currently debating, all the Israeli government's decision related to the annexation of the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, the ban of international NGOs and the shrinking civic space in Israel. Several EU-funded Israeli NGOs are under severe threat at the moment. The Israeli attacks on the European vessels on the flotilla and the unlawful kidnapping and detention of European citizens by the Israeli police and military, including several members of this House. None of these debates has ever been put on the agenda, not even when our own colleagues were detained and mistreated in Israeli prisons. We did not have a debate on that. But allow me to give you a few detailed reasons why parliamentary debates and resolutions on Palestine are more than necessary. When the Commission refuses to take action, the Parliament must raise the level of pressure. We do not have the power of legislative initiative. We are the guardians of the Commission. If we abdicate our role of guardians of the Commission, we give up on our mission as parliamentarians and fail our voters. We fail the utmost majority of EU citizens for whom torture and death penalty are unacceptable crimes. Second, we miss important opportunities to make a difference. Just last week, a representative of Israeli civil society clearly told us that the only chance to block the adoption of annexation bill, death penalty bills, and NGO bans and so on is international pressure, because a crushing majority of Israeli lawmakers is on the same page of Netanyahu. Everyone is asking us to raise pressure, not to stop. And then we miss chances to give some credibility back to the EU. When Commission and Council struggle to draw red lines, compromising our own acquis and core values, Parliament must step up and show European citizens that the EU matters and won't passively watch history unfold. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cecilia. Barry Andrews from the Renew Group.
Thank you, Manus, and again to thank you to Lynn and her staff for organising it, and Cecilia and Anna Miranda. I'm the chair of the DEVA committee, and we are charged in the Development Committee with dealing with the international humanitarian law as well as humanitarian access in conflict zones. And so what has happened in Gaza over the last 2.5 years is the worst example of breaches of international humanitarian law that we have seen in many, many decades, and it continues to happen, and yet we don't have a debate in the European Parliament. The frustrations that we all feel as parliamentarians at the continued undermining of Palestinians' right to self-determination, their right to life, frankly, and their right to humanitarian access shouldn't mean that we don't continually push this issue. In September, when President von der Leyen made reference for the first time to a man-made famine in Gaza, and when for the first time she said that we would look at ways to try to suspend parts of the association agreement between the EU and Israel, it had a serious impact in Israel. And I genuinely believe it demonstrated that when Europe takes a moral stand, take a principled stand on this issue, it has impact. And that's why we should never give up. That's why we should never tire of trying to put this on the agenda. And even more especially now in the context of what's happening in Iran, we should make sure that this is not in the background, that it is in the foreground. We have seen, for example, that the Rafah crossing, as Lynn has pointed out, is still closed. Karen Shalom, I understand, is reopened. But Israel explained this on the basis of security considerations. 2.5 years into this, these war crimes, it's quite extraordinary that could be a plausible excuse for that. And of course, DG ECHO staff are not allowed access to Gaza. That is something that we have to bring up in the Parliament. That is something that our voices as MEPs are relevant around. The second issue is around our NGOs that are operating in Gaza and the West Bank. As recently as last Friday, the Israel Supreme Court froze the suspension that was supposed to happen on the 1st of March for NGOs. So technically, while the review happens at the Supreme Court, this is going to continue for the likes of MSF and Oxfam. They continue work, but in an atmosphere of extraordinary uncertainty. So we have to now bring this directly to the Commission and say, look, we have an adequacy decision on data protection with Israel. And if it is your insistence that the names of Palestinian workers with these NGOs are shared with the Israeli government, that is a clear breach of your commitments under that adequacy decision, and that should be withdrawn. And I sincerely believe that is something that the Commission will take seriously, they will consider, but it is only if we get the platform in the European Parliament to make that very concerted point jointly as members of the European Parliament. Finally, I will say that on sanctions and the West Bank, what's happening, as Lynn has pointed out, is something that, look, we're never going to get a full agreement across all of the 27 EU member states, but these are things that individual member states can either do individually or collectively, and again, it's some pressure we can apply. And I finish by saying not being able to do everything should never be an excuse to do nothing. So, thank you.
Thank you, Barry. We move on to Anna Miranda.
Merci beaucoup. Je peux parler en français. Simplement, la voix des citoyens en Europe nous demande que nous ne pouvons pas nous arrêter. La voix des citoyens dit que la Palestine doit être free, mais surtout que l'aide humanitaire doit arriver à Gaza, qu'il faut finir l'occupation et l'apartheid qu'Israël commet dans la Palestine. Pendant 2 ans, j'ai demandé 1 minute de silence au début de la plénière. Jamais j'ai obtenu 1 minute de silence. Simplement, quand il y avait les mal appelés moments de cessez-le-feu, ou bien appelé aussi le procès de paix, que ce n'est pas un vrai procès de paix, on a eu 1 minute de silence. Donc, le Parlement a différents standards. Ça dépend si c'est pour une guerre, ça dépend si c'est pour l'autre. On l'a vu ça, parce que toujours on a retiré la possibilité d'avoir 1 minute de silence. Simplement 1 minute de silence pour les plus que 80 000 Palestiniens assassinés pour Israël. Et dans les mois suivants, nous avons vu comme il y a un silence, comme il y a toute une demande des groupes progressistes, que nous sommes ici bien représentés avec toutes les voix de la Commission de développement, de la Commission de la délégation de Palestine, aussi les voix des différents pays, non? De l'Italie, de l'Irlande, mais aussi des nations comme la mienne. Et on voit que la demande qui, pour les rues, c'est bien un cri de solidarité, un cri d'humanité, n'est pas accepté dans le Parlement, surtout pour la majorité des groupes de droite et d'extrême droite qui dénient la possibilité démocratique de parler sur un sujet qui c'est concerné pour les droits internationaux et les droits humanitaires internationaux. Quand j'étudie à Louvain-la-Neuve, ça fait déjà longtemps, j'avais un professeur qui s'appelait Olivier Descouter, qui était hier ici, et qui avait dit que les droits internationaux prévalaient toujours sur les décisions. On voit que maintenant, on est dans le moment de la force, dans le moment de la rage, dans le moment de la haine. On est dans un Parlement qui renie de parler de l'humanité. Quand ça fait un an, j'étais à Rafah, au moment du cross-border, et les aliments, les médicaments ne pouvaient pas passer. Après, Israël a laissé passer un peu et maintenant a détruit 2 sièges de la UNRWA à Jérusalem, mais aussi à Gaza. On ne laisse pas passer les organisations humanitaires et ça c'est affreux. Ça c'est contre les droits internationaux, contre les lois humanitaires du monde. Donc, notre obligation comme députés européens, c'est de demander que le Parlement parle de ça, qu'il y a des débats, que les débats publics y aient dans la rue, bien aussi au Parlement. Et notre obligation, c'est aussi d'accomplir les droits internationaux et que le Parlement accomplisse les droits internationaux dans toutes les commissions qui ont la compétence, soit AFET, soit DB, sont les compétences qui ont dans ces commissions, et aussi le débat public qui est dans la société. Parce que nous parlons beaucoup de fois des choses qui n'intéressent pas la société, et un problème qui c'est dans les rues, de tous les rues, de Galice, de mon pays, d'Italie, d'Irlande, de France, et beaucoup de pays, on ne parle pas. Et donc, c'est pour ça que cette conférence a eu pour l'intention de dénoncer ces blocus, qu'on est dans les débats, et surtout aussi pour dire qu'on est avec les Palestiniens pour défendre l'humanité. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Anna Miranda. We will now open it up to the floor. If you would like to ask a question, please raise your hand, tell us your name and your organisation. I'll start with a question from Vincenzo Genovese online. Vincenzo.
Good morning. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Vincenzo.
Thank you very much for this press conference. I would like to ask you to the MEPs if their group leaders will push again for a debate on Gaza, also in the COP today, which is scheduled at 4 p.m., and especially to the Renew Europe group, if all the MEPs are on board to this request. And then a second question, if I may. It seems that there could be soon or in the next months another humanitarian mission to the Palestinian Territory, a new flotilla. I would like to ask to the MEPs if they would join. I saw that MEP Boylan has joined the previous one, so I would like to know if they support this initiative and in case if they will join. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vincenzo. Maybe Lynn, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, I suppose just very briefly to answer the first question, and then I'll let Barry answer for the Renew group. But I mean, the purpose of this press conference is in advance of that meeting to request that the political groups that are blocking a debate on Palestine remove that block, because I think my colleagues have rightly pointed out we're frustrated and we're answerable to our electorate, and they want us to be talking about Palestine. And when we don't have a debate in the Parliament of something of such importance, we're not doing our jobs. In regards to the flotilla, I was a participant on the legal observer boat that went, and I spent 2 weeks on that. But I'm not joining the flotilla this time around, but I offer them 100% support. And I think that people put their lives in danger and join these flotillas because parliamentarians and legislators fail to do their jobs, which is to make sure that aid gets into Gaza. So I will always stand in solidarity with those members of the public who do that, put their lives at risk because we're failing to do our jobs.
Cecilia, would you like to, will we go down the...
Just added that, of course, we support the creation of a maritime corridor to go into Gaza, and soon we will have we will host some members of the Global Summit Flotilla to discuss the opening of a maritime corridor. Of course, we can't help but support in their job. As per, will I join? Unsure about that. We'll see.
Yeah, well, look, Renew has always supported debate on this. That doesn't mean to say Renew is completely united on the issue. There are different voices within Renew. For people won't need me to remind them of that, but we very much support the debate. And in fact, Hilde Woutmans, my colleague in Renew, had a very large role to play in making sure that we had a common position in a resolution in the Parliament in the autumn. On a mission, of course, I'd be very happy to go. I'm very sympathetic to Lynn's position as the chair of this delegation, and as first vice chair, I'd obviously take her advice as to what we should be doing, because we think we should be taking we shouldn't ignore the fact that we have the head of a delegation who is restricted from carrying out her functions, and we should make sure that we use every office within this Parliament to try and make sure that that is brought to an end.
Well, I'll just take the next question from Agnese Buffano online.
I had a question about the annexation specifically, given the continued annexation of the occupied West Bank, as you've spoken about. I was wondering, beyond international pressure, in the case of a debate, what concrete actions will you be pushing for exactly for the EU to respect the continued commitment to international law and the long-held view of two-state solutions, such as suspending agreements, conditioning military support, anything along that line?
Well, certainly from the left group, we're absolutely calling for suspension of the EU-Israel Association Agreement. We believe that the European institutions hold a huge amount of leverage and they're failing to use that leverage and have failed to do so for years now, but particularly given that the EEAS review found that Israel was in breach of Article 2, something that we all could see plainly with our own eyes, but it is now confirmed that that is the case, and yet no actions have been taken. So in September there was hope when Commissioner von der Leyen talked about sanctions against Israel, but unfortunately that pressure seems to have waned now and no action has been taken. So that's the first and foremost. I would also in the left group call for a two-way arms embargo, and I would echo what Barry has said. I've met with Commissioner McGrath on the adequacy agreement and have called for it to be suspended, both for the reasons that the threat it puts to Palestinian lives in terms of data being given to Israeli authorities, but also for EU citizens who work for those international NGOs.
And we'll take a question from the room.
Thank you. This is Sheriff Fitcherton from Anadolu Agency. I just want to say, I know we're here to bring up the issue of Palestine, obviously, because the situation is so dire and there's so much of a lack of a debate. But if we look at the general conjuncture right now, Israel is attacking about 3, 4, maybe 5 countries simultaneously. And there are many comments, if you look around, that because what was happening in Gaza was not stopped, because nobody could stop this. Now Israel, because of the impunity that it has faced, has the free hand to do whatever it wants. It goes to it attacks Iran, it attacks Lebanon, Yemen, Syria, and wherever. So as a journalist, I've brought this up in the EU Commission and what the EU Commission can do. And obviously there are a number of steps that the EU Commission can take, and we can see that since the speech of the Union, no action has been taken on the part of the EU. What is your general call for EU-Israeli relations? And Strada and Boylan, whoever would like to answer. Thank you.
Do you want to? We can work along if you want.
Yeah. After you. No problem.
So we start from there?
Yeah, but you first.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, we have been asking accountability for all this time exactly for this reason, because accountability is needed not only to protect the actual victims, but to avoid the next victims. And if you don't stop a war criminal, it doesn't have any deterrence to avoid the next war crime. So for sure, this is badly linked to the lack of accountability. And yeah, we've been asking the Commission and the Council to act exactly for this reason, and now we are seeing that fire is spreading everywhere. And now we are also seeing, I think it's a bit tricky. I saw a lot of colleagues who were commenting on the what happened in Iran, like, oh, we welcome free Iran. Of course, everybody is happy when a tyrant is opposed, but we feel relieved, but we cannot accept that this is the way to rule international order. Of course, it's not. This is the law of the jungle, and we've been warning the Commission that it's not only about Palestinian, it's about a world order, it's about the way we are living together as a community of states. This is the result.
And Miranda, would you like to?
Yes, Israel is the only country of the West Bank, of this part of the world, that hasn't signed the Treaty of No Proliferation of Nuclear Arms. That is a fact. Israel is a country that is denounced in the International Court, and now, at this current moment, the Hague Group is in meeting in The Hague concerning the accountability and concerning the decisions of the International Court. 48 countries are at this moment in The Hague. Colombia, Namibia, South Africa, countries that battle a lot for peace. And we battle also a lot for peace here in this parliament. And when we want to speak a word, I don't say against, I say only denouncing Israel by the apartheid or the occupation, we are blocked. We are blocked by the other groups. No, it's the question that is a fact, a mathematical fact also. But the problem is the Council, because the blocus against the sanctions, the blocus against the condemnations at the first moment, the condemnations, the no definition of genocide when it's a genocide, because in the international law, the facts, the murders, the destruction of hospital houses is a genocide, and is seen by a number of organizations. But also the double standard of the European Commission, with the flag at the first moment, one flag, the other flag of Palestine never, facts again. But now it's not only a question of facts, it's a question of the completion of the international law. And we are in, as said my dear colleague Cecilia Strada, we are in a jungle, and we are in a change of order of the international law. And we, as progressive parties, we demand to come back to the international respect of the law on the United Nations Treaty, because it's the only way, and also the diplomacy, and also the finish of the double standard of the European Union to condemn some conflicts and to escape of other conflicts.
Thank you, Anna Miranda. As we're coming to the end of our time, I might ask Lynn to close us out.
Yeah, and just to add, I suppose the point, since I've been elected as the chair of the delegation, I've consistently called for the EU Commission and the Council to just apply international law fairly and transparently. And I think the situation we're in now is a result of the lack of that application of international law. We continuously see multilateralism undermined, the ICC undermined, the ICJ undermined, and now we're in a situation where, as Cecilia has said, that fire is spreading completely in the region because there has been zero accountability. So we need to go back to doing what we should be doing, which is the EU being a beacon of hope for the world in terms of applying international law and human rights, and no double standards. But I would like to thank everyone for attending today, and I hope that our colleagues, particularly in the EPP group, are listening, and that we will get the debate on Palestine and Gaza, because I'm sure in their countries also the public are insisting that the politicians do their job, and we're not doing our job if we continue to dig our heads in the sand when it comes to Palestine.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to the journalists for coming out today. Thank you for the interpreters and the services, and to our speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manus.